Hello, and welcome to Tea with 𝗂𝗫. I am your host, 𝗂𝗫, and welcome. This is the first Tea with 𝗂𝗫 of 2022, so welcome. If you are new to the 𝗂𝗫 YouTube channel, then you know that, or you wouldn't know that the Tea with 𝗂𝗫, this is a series that I do the third Thursday of each month. And this is just a time for us to just kind of have like intimate conversations, no guests, no kind of like list of questions. This is just a time for us to sit, have a conversation about how we can become the best version of ourselves. So what you're going to see me do, I have my camera here, I have my notes over here, so you're kind of see me go back and forth. And if I can get this ear thing right, that'd be great. There we go. So welcome. I'm very excited to have a conversation with you tonight. This is a topic that in my personal life, something that I've been going through or over or kind of reconciling within myself. And I thought that some folks in the YouTube world could probably relate to this, and especially subscribers to this channel. So very excited for this conversation tonight, and we'll work through it together. Before we go any further, this is Tea with 𝗂𝗫. So of course, I hope that you have your tea ready. So this is the tea that I am drinking tonight. This is not sponsored in any way. So that's the tea that I'll be drinking tonight. If you are sipping on something, maybe it's not tea, but if you're sipping on something, just drop it in the comments and let me know exactly what it is. All right, so today we're going to be talking about the art of letting go, or basically understanding when there's a relationship that you can't fix. Now, when I post this on social media conversation tonight, many people probably thought this was about some type of romantic relationship or a friendship that maybe you've decided for yourself, or maybe both parties have decided to go their separate ways. But this is actually a conversation that we're going to have regarding parents, our relationship with our parents, and what happens when you realize maybe the emotional support, the encouragement, or whatever that you need to have received from your parent. What if you're not receiving that? And how do you manage those feelings? Because you could feel that, well, my mom and dad did X, Y, and Z for me, so I should be grateful. So I shouldn't feel the sadness that I don't have this connection or this relationship that I want. But I'm here to tell you that, you know, how you feel about the relationship with your parents, that's something for you to really think through. And maybe even if you can have a conversation with your parents, do so. But many of us are, maybe you can't for whatever reason, maybe because of health reasons, you're unable to have the conversation with your parents. Maybe they're not in a capacity which they can talk to you. Or maybe it's like, you know what, if I talk to mom or dad, it's just going to end up in a huge argument and it's not even worth it. So for those that are joining, I would love for you to post in the comments about what you think about having this conversation tonight, about realizing that maybe it's time to let go of the relationship that you imagined, that you could have, kind of imagine this relationship that you wanted with your parents, and maybe come into that realization that it's not going to happen. What are your thoughts? And even me saying that, what are your thoughts about that type of statement? And is that something, and let me know also in the comments if that's something that you are dealing with yourself. Because when we think about our parents, we have kind of an idea, I don't even know, basically says, don't even know where to start. And I'm sure that's many of us, because it can be very conflicting. Because when we're having this conversation, I'm not taught, a lot of times we go into, oh, well, my parent wasn't abusive and, you know, they did provide for me. And we try to put up all of these different scenarios to kind of justify that we shouldn't feel a certain way. And so what I want to do is create an environment tonight that we can speak freely about feelings that we have about our parents. Because before we can begin the healing process, before we can begin to really understand, exactly what type of relationship we're dealing with, we have to be honest about what the relationship is. And a lot of times that's the hardest part, because oftentimes we can, because we don't have the type of relationship that we want with parents, we may kind of have this romanticized view of, and kind of using it to say like this imaginary view of what the relationship is. And so when you begin to look at it for exactly the truth of the relationship, that can be very painful. So we're going to be talking about that tonight. And to try to help us get through this, because this is not about kind of pointing the fingers at our parents. This is not about trying to set up a situation which it's like, well, they should have done this and they should have done that. This is about us beginning to look at our parents as people. And I think that part of it, once we begin to do that, that then helps everything else make sense. And let me know if that makes sense to you so far. So to start off, and please jump in the comments if there's anything that you want to add or anything that you need me to kind of go back to. So when we're thinking about relationships, drop in the comments what you think relationships should be. What are the purpose of relationships? So just kind of drop in the comments, what do you think? What are the purpose of relationships? What's the goal of relationships? Just to kind of get the conversation started. If we're looking at a healthy, functional relationship, you want a relationship that is supportive. You want a relationship in which you are nurtured, in which you are growing, you and the other person that's in that relationship with you, you're both able to grow. And sometimes even maybe even challenge each other to grow, not in a disrespectful way, but in a way that maybe challenges ideas or challenges you to maybe break bad patterns of behavior, to become the highest version of yourself. So for you, what do you, and those joining live, or if you're joining in the replay, drop below, let me know, what are your thoughts on the purpose of relationships while I take a sip of my tea. That was good. Okay. So when we're looking at relationships, we are looking at, does this relationship provide emotional support for me? Does it help me grow, as I said in the opening? And these are things that I want you to think about as you begin to think about the relationship that you have with your parents. And the goal of our conversation tonight is not to just kind of X your parents out of your life. It's just to begin to think about, am I being honest about this relationship that I have? And have I reached a point where I realize that there's nothing else I can do to try to work this relationship or fix this relationship? How many of you have heard that saying, it is what it is? This is just what the relationship is, and being okay with that. So the goal tonight is to get to the point of how we can begin to be okay. Sorry guys about that, about the relationship with our parents. So when we think about being a parent, and I am not a parent, okay? So full disclosure, I'm not a parent yet. So when we're thinking about what having a parent and what we would want, the role that we would want our parents to have in our lives, let me know for you in your life, what were some of the ways that you needed or wanted your parent or parents to show up for you? Was it to come in and provide you more attention? Was it to maybe you didn't feel like you weren't loved or appreciated? Did you feel as though you were more of a nuisance or a bother to your parents? So in your thinking about your upbringing, and this is when we kind of do that inner child work, what were some things that you wish that you received as a child, that you feel that was lacking in your relationship with your parent? And then that's going to dive into more as an adult, but what were some things as a child that you wish that you received from your parents. And we'll just give that a little bit of time to sink in and think through. And these could be feelings and thoughts that you have never really thought of before. Because a lot of times we do place our parents on pedestals and we feel like we can't begin to think, you know what, I need a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that, to help kind of round me as an individual. And maybe you felt that we couldn't ask for those things. So let me know if there's anything that you felt that you needed as a child but did not receive. Okay, I'm not quite sure what this is. I hope it's not trolling. Okay. So when we're looking at the different relationships when we're looking at the relationship with our parents, and we are looking at maybe feeling that there are pieces that are missing and that we wish that we did have those different elements to the relationship. We have one way that can help us in that relationship and understanding how this relationship with our parents work is to begin to look at our parents as people. And I know that's challenging because it's like, I'm your son, I'm your daughter. I need you to show up for me this way. How come you don't know that? But let's be honest, before our parents had us, they had a whole life. And they had their own set of traumas. And this is not excusing any type of behavior, but this helps us to not take things personally. And this is one of my favorite agreements in the 4 agreements of not taking things personally, because once you begin to understand this, you'll realize that a lot of the behavior that you've seen from your parents, it had nothing to do with you. It had a lot to do with their own trauma, their unresolved trauma, and the tools that they had to show up for you as a parent. And once you begin to see it that way, it begins to say, okay, wow, so really when, mom, dad, or whomever was screaming or not showing me attention or just kind of being physically there, but mentally and emotionally elsewhere, you begin to realize like, wow, that didn't have anything to do with me being a bad child. How many of you were called like, you're just bad? I know that several people that I've spoken to about their upbringing, they were told that they were a devil or a demon child. These things were kind of yelled at them when the parent was kind of maybe frustrated, angry at them about something. And these are all words that if you hear as a child, that can be very hurtful, very harmful to you. And if these things are not talked about, which oftentimes they're not, a lot of times that we carry this, what we're talked about. And sorry, guys, I don't know who this person is. But I think this is trolling. Okay. So when we begin to look at what we've carried from childhood into adulthood, and now being an adult, we can probably better process things that were going on in our childhood, understand them a little bit better as adults. But it's one thing that a lot of times we don't do is begin to really look at our parents as people and people that have come into, had their own experiences growing up. People that had their own traumatic events that many times probably were not talked about or not resolved. And then as a child, kind of we come on the scene with all these needs, all these different desires that we have growing up, things that we need from our parents. And many times they probably did not have the tools to provide them because they were probably not provided the tools. So once we begin to see that, that then takes this feeling off of, I can't say anything negative about my parents, and I have to continue to bury these emotions that I feel because they're my parents. They're on this pedestal. But once you begin to see them as people, it's like, wow, okay, so as people, nobody's perfect. Everybody has their issues. Even if your parent wants to pretend as though they're perfect, we all have our issues. Everybody walking this planet has issues and has traumas that they need to work through or are working through. So when I say beginning to see your parents as people, how does that resonate with you? Meaning that we're now taking them off this pedestal and understanding that if they didn't have the tools that they need, let's be honest, to show up for themselves, then how can they, then they would not have those tools to show up properly for you. And so when we begin to have that type of dialogue, you begin to see that, okay, again, for me to take it on personally of the treatment of my parents, and not saying that it's okay, but realize that it was something bigger than you. It was their own issues that they did not work through. And now that you're an adult and say that you're starting to work through your traumas that you experienced from childhood, and you begin to realize like, wow, there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of behaviors that I had in my own life that were not healthy. And that type of unhealthy behavior played out in relationships that I had. You can now see how, wow, when you put your parent on a pedestal to think that they should behave a certain way, you begin to realize like, wow, I realized through my own journey that I behaved in certain ways that were not constructive because of the traumas that I had in my life. So once we really begin to kind of peel back the layers and begin to realize that everybody is working through some type of issue. And maybe they're not, some people are not even aware that they have different things that they need to work through. Once we begin to do that, then we begin to realize like, okay, parents are people. They came with their own ish before I ever entered the world. So I have to understand that I cannot take things personally. So let me know if that resonates with you and if that makes sense. The other part to this is when we do realize that parents are people, and you may try to have a conversation with your parent about wanting to have this emotional connection, wanting to have a deeper type of connection, for lack of whatever, with your parent, and they may not acknowledge that. How do you resolve that within yourself? What if they think the relationship is fine, and on the inside you feel like we don't even have a relationship, but they're saying the relationship is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. And if you try to bring it up, it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Or they won't even acknowledge how you feel about the relationship. So how do you reconcile that? And for me, on my journey, that was all about seeing my parents as people and knowing that, yes, I would want a certain type of relationship with them. But if that did not occur, I would have to be okay with letting go and realizing that this is the relationship, this is the experience that I will have. And I don't like it, but I have to know when am I pouring too much energy into a situation that I know for a fact I'm not going to get a return on. And so when it's time to just put the pause button on, and I will say, in my own life, beginning to realize like, okay, this is what the relationship is. That was also freeing. It was freeing because the realization that there was nothing more that I could do, and being okay with, and it's a hard process to get to, but it is so liberating and saying, okay, this is what the relationship is. I have to accept this. And it is liberating because it's like, I no longer have to pour my energy into trying to make this work, because it is very draining. How many of you can attest when you're trying to force a relationship to be a certain way? that is extremely draining. It takes a lot of energy out of you that you could be investing into something else. And if you are doing that, you're trying to pour and change your relationship that you have with your parents, and you as an adult have your own separate family, right? Maybe husband, wife. That's going to deplete you from having the energy to pour into your own household. So there comes a point when you have to realize that, listen, mom, dad isn't going to change. This is the relationship. They have their own traumas, their own issues that they have to work through. If they refuse to work through those, and I am continuing to work through mine, I have to realize I have to set up these healthy boundaries. And the healthy boundary is I'm no longer pouring into this situation. And I know that's hard to do because there's always this thought of everything that your parents have done for you. And I'm going to be honest, and I don't know how this is going to sound, but this is the honest truth. Your parents decided to have you. Your parents made a baby and had you. Now you are kind of in this world, navigating, figuring it all out. And if you have made a decision that, yes, you decided to have me, but I need to set up these healthy boundaries to protect my peace, to protect my household, then I don't know why I'm getting all these spam. So it's important for you to set up those healthy boundaries. So that way, like, as I said, so you can pour into your household, pour into yourself, pour into new relationships, and begin that healing process for yourself. And this path, and this is all a part of that path to acceptance, it is challenging. It's not something that's easy. It's not something that comes overnight, but it's something that as you continue to work on yourself and you realize your parents for who they are, not as mom, not as dad, but just as state their name, and that they have their own traumatic experiences, they come with their own baggage, and then you came on the scene, right? Did they work through all of those, through that baggage? Did they work through that trauma before becoming a parent? Have they acknowledged those traumas? And if they have not, that is going to pop up in different areas of their life. And that's definitely would impact the relationship that they would have with you. So if this makes sense, what we're talking about tonight, I know we have a few trolls, or I don't know what's going on. But if this resonates with you, just drop it in the comments and let me know. So this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart because we always want that happy ending, right? We always want to have a relationship, especially with our parents, that we can have a relationship with our parents, and that we can connect on a very deep level, and that they can, we can go to them with different issues that are impacting us. And to come to that realization that that type of relationship may not happen, it can be very hurtful. But again, once you realize that, you kind of take yourself out the middle of it and kind of look at it as an observer. And you kind of see your parent as, whatever experiences that they have had, and begin to realize, like, okay, this is deeper than me. Right? Like, begin to look at the patterns that they have with their other relationships with other people. Like, totally take yourself out of the equation for a moment. What do those relationships look like? And as you begin to work through that process, and you can do this through journaling, through counseling, there's a host of different ways you begin to work through this relationship with your parents and begin to realize, okay, I'm seeing how their relationships are with others. What was their relationship like with your father or with your mother? What were their romantic relationships like? And I say that because if they have a relationship, this intimate relationship, do they have these close, intimate relationships, or do they kind of keep everybody at a distance? Do you feel that they keep you at a distance? It's like, oh, don't get too close. Or parents that say, I'm not a hugger, I don't hug, I don't kiss, I don't say I love you. Where is all that stemming from? And as you begin to kind of ask those questions within yourself, you begin to realize that this, again, is issues, traumas, I should say, that they've had before you came on the scene. And so because of that, if you can have the conversation with your parents, that is awesome. If you can have a sit down conversation saying, listen, this is how I am experiencing our relationship, and I would like to experience it differently. If you can have that conversation, have it. And that could be a transformational conversation that you have. But if you're unable to have that conversation, then the hard part is resolving it within yourself about, okay, this is the reality of our relationship, and I have to put up my healthy boundaries and operate within a way that conserves my energy, conserves my peace, because you can't just pour into something that is not pouring into you, because that is how you will deplete yourself. So I just wanted to come on. This broadcast will be a little short. This is the first one in coming back for the new year. So be sure to drop in the comments and let me know your thoughts, if this information was helpful for you, if this is a topic that you would want to come back to and we can discuss further. I would be honored to do so. But most importantly, when you're doing this type of work, please extend grace to yourself, be patient with yourself. This is not an overnight journey. For me, this was a process. And you may go through periods where you feel angry, you feel resentment, you just feel sad. But knowing that you can work through, and you can work through those issues with a therapist, maybe a life coach, depending on what your needs are, you can begin to work through those different feelings and those different pain points and come to a place of acceptance, of accepting what the relationship is. And, and it's, when you accept what the relationship is, it's like, do you leave an opening for the possibility for a change? There's also always the possibility for change, but you operate in a space of no expectation of change. So hopefully that makes sense. And all of this is extremely empowering, because there's nothing like pouring into something and not getting a return. You're just going to frustrate yourself. You're going to just get angry. And that is not the signs of a healthy relationship at all. So I want to thank you all for joining me with Tea with 𝗂𝗄, a short session tonight. But please make sure that you join me for the Healing Element podcast. We'll be back next Tuesday. I'll be having on my podcast Monique Johnson, the queen of soulful music. She's going to be on, and we're going to have a wonderful conversation about her own healing journey and how she used music to heal and transform her life. So thank you all so much for joining me, and be sure to comment below if you found this episode helpful. All right, guys, have a good night.